2020 required many plans to be adjusted. And that happened to us as well when looking at our humanist for the holiday season that we established last year. And if you remember, last year we held our interactive intergenerational winter festival 1 week. That was followed the next week by an ethical sing along. And the final week was our Do Tell Diner with a potluck and stories to share. We really hope to be able to continue that tradition at the end of this year with hopefully the widespread distribution of the vaccine. But back to 2020. One of the adjustments for 2020 celebrations was not being able to physically get together with family and friends. But I know that sharing my stories of past events brings them alive, even if only for a short while. And I wanted to start 2021 off with remembrances of holidays past. Most of us did not grow up in ethical culture. So we have extended family traditions around the winter holidays. And I thought it would be great to reminisce and for us to share in these experiences. So I'm going to start off by saying that I grew up Christian. My dad was a minister, and we had the whole Santa Claus and Christmas Eve services tradition. But David, my husband, grew up Jewish, and he didn't actually love the idea of having a Christmas tree and having those traditions. And when we had kids and were attending Bergen Ethical, we were really looking for something else. So I'm going to share a picture now of um, this is a winter festival that had been held in the past, our intergenerational activity driven event. And you can see that there was a sun that we had created, and there's lots of activities, and kids are involved. We loved having winter festival here. And when we started, the at Ethical about 20 years ago, the Sunday school was doing presentations for this festival, and we would read a book. So I would like to share a different screen. Um, this was shared in the Sunday school, the winter solstice, and this book was a story of how different ancient cultures around the world celebrated the shortest day of the year. And I wanted to begin celebrating our own holiday, not attached to the Christian and Jewish traditions. I'm going to stop sharing there. Um, and Diane Kozarski, who is here on the call this morning, once said, made a comment that that if kids received presents on the holidays, that would be the deciding factor in having them identify it as being a worthy enough holiday to celebrate. So that is what our family decided to do. We began to celebrate our family holiday on the winter solstice. So this is generally around December 21, December 22, and sometimes it's in the middle of the week and the kids were still in school. But we would celebrate on the night of winter solstice, and it became a very special night. So we would make sun cookies, which is actually snickerdoodles just rolled in yellow sprinkles. And the kids love that because, you know, having something to eat is also a very good hook. And Ben actually makes sun cookies. That's his job. And he remembers and he wants to do them. Still to this day, he's 25 and he is making sun cookies for our solstice celebration. We also would order out food so everybody could choose their own restaurant. So sometimes we were going to McDonald's and the pizza store and the Chinese restaurant all right before celebrating for solstice. And it was, you know, everybody gets to make a big choice. And this was they also really liked this as well. We also exchanged presents at that celebration. Now, I found this dress. I don't know if you can see. I found this dress at a dance weekend. I also, Cookie and Janet, I also do some dancing. This was at a dance weekend, and I just loved it and thought it was perfect for solstice. So I now wear it every solstice, every winter festival. I now started wearing it to work on solstice, and I get lots of comments. And now people are kind of finding out that, oh, I am an ethical culturist and I celebrate solstice. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Um, in the past 1 year, Ben built, when he was smaller, he built a bonfire out of sticks and twine and decorated it with flames. And we put it on our front lawn on solstice and jumped over it, yelling, "Happy solstice!" which caused a little bit of commotion on our street. We also made suns with a black side and a gold side, so that the week before solstice, we had the black side showing, and the day of solstice, we flipped it over and the gold side was showing. We had a tree at first, but it was hung with just white lights and suns. But eventually, over the years, ornaments made their way there. And David did eventually say that he sometimes liked it with the ornaments. So when they were little, my kids got Hanukkah presents from David's side of the family, and Christmas presents from my side of the family, and solstice presents. So it was a win-win. Now I'd like to open this up for you to share your stories, and I'm going to ask David to look for raised hands and call on people. So I hope you share some.
Okay, and I want to mention that everyone will have the ability to share their screen. So if you have photos, you can share it with everyone. So if you have anything you'd like to share, and okay, Pam Berglund, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
I love Christmas. I love Hanukkah, and I love solstice. Because of that, I have always been able to celebrate our holidays in various ways. When I was a kid growing up, I came in from a Jewish family, and we would celebrate only Hanukkah. And my sister and I would say, why can't we have a Christmas tree? It's so much fun to have a Christmas tree and put up lights. And my parents used to say, well, that would be nice, but we're Jewish, so we celebrate Hanukkah. But the good thing about Hanukkah is we got lots of presents. And it was a time of gift giving for everybody. And so every Hanukkah, one of the family would go to everybody's house, or go to the house prescribed for, and we would receive tons and tons of gifts. And you can imagine how much fun that was, unwrapping gifts under the sofa, because we didn't have a Christmas tree. So as we got older, somehow we decided that we wanted a tree. And so my friends invited us to their Hanukkah, and they had a Hanukkah tree. And the Hanukkah tree was blue and white. And guess what was under the tree? Presents. So all of a sudden we started a new movement of Hanukkah tree as opposed to Christmas trees. Well, that all went well until I got married, and my husband, who's Seventh-day Adventist, had always had a Christmas tree. And so we started celebrating Christmas and Hanukkah together with a Christmas tree. And we used to go out and buy the tree, the real pine tree, and it would linger in the house for weeks. And it was a lot of fun because Giselle was born at that time. And so everybody had their Christmas presents and everybody sang Christmas songs. Fast forward, my sister got married to a fellow, my brother-in-law, who his mother was Jewish and his father was Christian Protestant from England. And so now we celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, and he loves to say Happy Kwanzaa too outside on Kwanzaa evening. And so we all celebrate the holiday starting the day after Thanksgiving. And we always have lots and lots of presents under the Christmas tree. So from going from no tree to a tree, that was my love and memory of Christmas. And this year, because of COVID, I couldn't be with my family, but my best friend and her partner or her friend came to my house for Christmas, and we had a lovely Christmas dinner and got lots of presents too. So no matter what way you put it, Christmas is Christmas, and you'll never take that away from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Eric Sandhusen, go ahead, please.
Great, thank you. Yeah, as you can see, I still put up the tree, and part of my tradition is like not getting around to actually taking it down uh, until way much later than I really should. But probably this afternoon it's going to come down finally. You know, it being 2021 and all. But I was raised in a Christian household, and we would celebrate, although it was a fairly I guess I'll say liberal or almost secular, pretty secular Christian household. In fact, the church that I attended, I noticed at one point that the stained glass actually had a stained glass window with Einstein and Copernicus and Freud in it. So those were the sort of the saints of my particular sect. But the tradition that I remember is that on Christmas Day, my mom and dad would pack the four of us kids up in the car, and we would drive up to Blairstown to my aunt and uncle's house. And they were very much close to the land people. They lived on 66 acres up there on the side of a mountain with just the most amazing view. And it was always a little bit of an adventure just getting up the mountain in the old station wagon full of kids and all kinds of stuff. We would have we'd get up there, and a couple of things that I remember, because it was always a very special day. A couple of things I remember was, first of all the cousins, we'd get together, and this was in the days before cable TV and before they had DVDs or video recorders. So all of us kids would gather in one room where they had the black and white TV, and basically you were lucky to get, I think it was maybe CBS, that you'd be able to see the March of the Wooden Soldiers, Abbott and Costello. So it was always on, and we'd all, as cousins, would sit together in the back room watching that and laughing and joking and wrestling around, while the grown-ups were in the living room drinking whiskey sours to excess. But again, as I say, we were really pretty secular. But my aunt and uncle, as they had fantastic, they would go hunting in their woods for morel mushrooms, and they had wonderful garden. They just almost lived completely off the land. They heated their house with wood that they would cut and chop themselves. So there was always a roaring fire going, and it was very warm, even maybe a little bit too warm. And they would put out this long, long table that had to be U-shaped just in order to fit all of us, and serve the most fantastic spread of food. And it was always some of these old family traditional foods that we'd have. And the ones that I remember, of course, they had the turkey and the mashed potatoes and all that stuff. But the couple that I remember are kale mit Pinkelwurst. You know what kale is. If you're not German, you probably will never have heard of Pinkelwurst, which is kind of a barley sausage. And And the other one that they would make was oyster pie. And I always wondered, why would you make a pie out of oysters? And of course, us kids, we had to have our no thank you portion, and we'd sort of line up as if we were taking our medicine to have that taste of the oyster pie, which now, of course, it's the best thing in the world. I mean, give me an oyster pie, I'll have two. But and back then it was sort of like, okay, this is your rite of passage. You have to have your no thank you portion. They always made their own dandelion wine. So they'd break out the dandelion wine, and they had kept bees. So they had their own homemade honey. They even would tap trees for maple syrup. I mean, they really had like this amazing foxfire kind of lifestyle where they just were so natural and close to the land and healthy, and we loved it. And of course, we'd eat the no thank you portion of the bad stuff because we knew at the end of the meal we were going to get the homemade vanilla ice cream with the homemade caramel syrup drizzled on top. And I can tell you, you'll never get anything like that in any store, not even Bischoff's. But the biggest part, I mean, the biggest event for us when we would get together as a family was every year, my dad, he loved to go to garage sales. And on a Saturday, it was just his thing on a Saturday morning. And I think part of it was just because he liked to look into, it was a way to look into other people's lives. Maybe he was a little bit of a Snoopy guy, but he just loved to go to garage sales and see what was there. And so his goal was to collect all these little bric-a-brac. And he said he never would pay more than 50 cents for any one item. That was his rule. And he'd gather these things all year long until by the end of the year, before Christmas, he'd have a box. It was about the size of a washing machine box that we'd stick on top of the station wagon and tie it down. And that was always an adventure too. But we'd come up there with this big giant box, and he'd wrap all these things, and he'd put a little label on each one, just a number on there. And then he'd have his big master list. And we'd bring this box out, we'd stick it in the middle of the floor. We'd all be sitting around. And of course, the littlest kid was the one who got to reach into the box and pull it out. And he'd look and say, number 27. And my dad would check his big list and he'd say, 27, that's Uncle Win. So the little kid would toddle over to Uncle Win with this little wrapped gift, and Uncle Win would open it up. And, it was just something my dad had collected. It was the grab bag. This was our thing, was the annual grab bag. And by gosh, it was so much fun because you never knew what you were going to get. And sometimes you'd get it and you still wouldn't know what it was because that was the sort of thing my dad would, he'd say like, okay, well, they'll never guess what this thing is. It's a wine rack for your refrigerator or something. You just would look like a piece of plastic or something. But I do remember that we had a couple of pet rocks that my dad would pick up off the garage sale tables. And then one year, as I got a little bit old, I was in my teenage years, and I opened the present, and I remember it said legal pot. And of course, what it was an actual pot that you could cook in, but it's just a tiny little one. So anyway, that was always a big laugh there. So a very warm time, a really wonderful time. I'm still close to my cousins. I miss my dad a lot. I miss the grab bag, and I probably still have some of the bric-a-brac that he got in one of those garage sales sitting around the house somewhere. So that's my holiday memory.
Thank you, Eric. Next, Len or Allison, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
You're on.
Okay. Good morning. I grew up in ethical culture, and both my parents were Jewish, but it was sort of a well-kept secret in my family. I don't know why. They prided themselves in being extremely assimilated. And so we had the Christmas tree in my house. And as I probably previously mentioned in another discussion, if you want to alienate the most number of people possible, be a Jew with a Christmas tree in a neighborhood that's Jewish and Christian. I was like, I gotta hand it to my parents. We were like on a non-speaking basis with most of Queens because of the tradition that we observed. Having said that, I married Lenny, who had grown up in a more typical suburban Jewish experience. And then we had a daughter. And as anybody who has children knows, once you have a child, issues of religion take on a whole different meaning. And my daughter attended a nursery school, and it came holiday time, and you had to pick a project. Did you want to do the Christian project or the Jewish project? And my daughter sort of equivocated, and the teacher didn't want her to equivocate. The teacher felt you had to be one or the other. So the teacher took me aside, a very grandmotherly nursery school teacher, and said, we want your daughter to have a real sense of identity. So you might want to, tell her she's Jewish. So needless to say, at dinner that night, we had a thoughtful conversation about such matters. And I realized that in tribute to our heritage, even though at heart I'm ethical culture deep inside, I felt I really was obliged to cultivate a Jewish childhood for her. Well, this did not come naturally for me, so I had to wing it. And I developed a tradition with my daughter. Every year we would go out and buy a menorah. So now we own, I think, roughly 700 menorahs. It was sort of our search for something to mark the holiday. And we would have a Hanukkah party for all of her friends. The funny thing is 95% of them were all Christian, and they looked back on those years and said that the Hanukkah parties were one of the most fun parts of their childhood. So I'm not sure what to make of all of that, but we had a lot of good memories. And this year,
Oh, we
I'm sorry, I was
popped
trying to get the
into,
picture.
yeah.
I was trying to get a picture, but I can't get it.
this year, Lenny took a photograph of me when we were lighting the menorah. And I've never sent out a holiday card that had any religious significance. Every holiday card I had, as some people do, said season's greetings, because as an adult, I wish to offend no one. But this year, I took the plunge, and my holiday card, some of you may have received, is a picture of me with a menorah in front. And my parents are both gone, but I could die to know what my parents think of me seated with this beautiful menorah in front of us. And I'm hoping we can.
I'll share it later, but right now I can't get it. So
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. At some point during this morning, you may see a picture of me with a menorah.
We'll look forward to that. Thank you, Allison. Ron Schwartz, or possibly Lisa, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
About that. I
So
couldn't hear it.
disconcerting.
I'm sorry.
Hi there. So I'm going to share. So I grew up in a fairly large, what I'm going to call a meshed Italian family. We had my grandfather living with us, an uncle living with us, cousins who came on weekends. And in our family, Christmas Eve was a really big deal. We weren't really religious. We went to church. As a child, I did go to church. And once when I asked my dad never went to church, but once when I asked my mom why we go to church, she, what we believed, her answer was simply, it's tradition. You go because it's tradition. It's what you do. So that's what we did. Every Christmas Eve, we would have a big party at one of my uncle's homes in Leonia, where he lived, and we would all get together, cousins, extended family, on all sides of the family. There would be 25 people upwards, and it would be, the food would be pasta, start with pasta, and then lots of different types of fish, which was a Southern Italian tradition. So it would be a big feast, and there would always be music on blasting in the background. And My family loved to sing. My mother loved to sing. We were just talking about this today. My mom loved to yodel. And my uncle, who was a real character and the comedian of the family, he would love to record himself playing old rock and roll songs and singing to Frank Sinatra and the Four Seasons. And so this is what we would do on Christmas Eve. And it would be just so much fun. And there'd always be like a big alcoholic punch, which of course I wasn't of age, but we were allowed to drink it. We'd participate. It was great. And sometimes I'd invite my friends. It was kind of like an open house and very welcoming. So my friends to this day, my childhood friends who I'm still in contact with, when we get together once a year, we reminisce about those Christmas Eves because they'd be invited to come. And we would spend the night dancing and just having fun. And then, of course, you know, it was the place they could go where we were allowed to drink. And they lived down the block from the church. So then at midnight, we would all walk to mass. And we were not at all religious, but we loved to go to mass because the music was wonderful. It was really beautiful. And that's what I always loved about Christmas Eve masses was the music. So that was our Christmas Eve. Christmas Day, we always spent visiting people, and people visited. Actually, it was people visiting us. It was a day when people would just stop by and we'd have a pot of coffee on. And then later in the day, we would do some gift exchange. So that was kind of our Christmas tradition. Christmas Eve was the big deal. Then fast forward to my marrying Ron, who grew up Jewish. And many of you don't know our background. I'm not going to go into it now, but that was a big deal. And it was not accepted that I was not Jewish. So that was a whole story. But I was always curious on what I didn't know much about, about what Jews celebrated. I didn't grow up in a town where there were a lot of Jews. So came Christmas time, my in-laws were very, very, very uncomfortable with a Christmas tree. And so for years, we didn't really have one because if they came into our home, it would be so uncomfortable. And they just, it was too uncomfortable for us. So before we had kids, we just said, oh, the heck with it. But I wanted to celebrate something. So I wanted to learn all about Hanukkah. And we did start celebrating Hanukkah and lighting the candles. And my parents were, they were okay. They were okay with us doing that. I mean, my parents didn't have an issue with my even converting to Judaism, which is a whole other story. So
she wanted to know whether our kids were going to wear Yamahas on their heads.
Right. So we started making a big deal, and I tried to learn about what Hanukkah was. And for a while, we made a big deal out of Hanukkah. Fast forward having kids and moving to Teaneck and finding ethical culture. And I started to realize this wasn't right, that we weren't having a Christmas tree. This is my tradition. I was really kind of resenting it, So and then there was the whole thing of joining ethical culture and trying to help my in-laws to understand what ethical culture was. And this was a whole long process. So we finally had a Christmas tree, and we just wouldn't invite them over while the Christmas tree was up. And that became a real challenge when Hanukkah and Christmas was the same time. So, that was challenging. But eventually they came around, and I started on my whole thing of explaining to them how Christmas the tree was not a religious symbol. And it was really through ethical culture and my teaching the Sunday school, and Susan, that book that you alluded to, The Winter Solstice, when I started to really learn a little more about these traditions and the lights and the gift given. They were all pagan traditions that Christianity kind of stole these traditions, borrowed, whatever, and nothing to do with religion. It was a way of kind of warding off the darkness during the darkest days of the year, right before there were calendars. And I mean, how frightened people must have been that the days were so short and so dark. And as we know, it was a way to bring light into our lives. Even the gift giving, to this day, I feel it's a very nice distraction. We start with Thanksgiving, right? The darkest days of the year. And I feel like these traditions are a way for me personally a way to deal with the darkness, kind of a distraction, and to bring light into our homes. And so for us, the tree and the lights and my winter scene and putting lights outdoors and lighting candles, the menorah and lots of other candles around the home are just ways to bring light into the home until we have more light again. And so that's kind of how I view these holidays, and that is the winter solstice and what a winter solstice is all about. So I love that tradition. And of course, for us in our family, the gift giving was always a time, because I don't have family, extended family alive and around anymore. Christmas Day for our family was just a day when the four of us, us and our two kids, it was the one day a year, which was just family time. And we would have a big breakfast and we would have lots of gifts, but they were fun little gifts like tchotchkes and just little things. And just a way to spend the day having fun and opening the gifts and laughing and really thinking about what other people would like. So we still do that till this day. When we're in, we make our own Christmas Day because we have a West Coast family. So when we're out there, sometimes we'll make it a day like early in December. We call it the Schwartz Family Christmas, and we'll exchange gifts out there and then here with the East Coast kids. So that's kind of what we do, and that's kind of right.
Yeah, no, I just want to add that those traditions are passed along to our kids and our grandchildren now. Lennon and Marley FaceTimed us a couple of days ago and insisted that I sing the blessings over my son lighting the Hanukkah candles. So we did that over FaceTime, and the kids have no idea what I'm saying when I'm saying the Hebrew blessings.
They think it's funny.
But they love it. They think it's fun, and they love the fact that Poppy is singing from 3,000 miles away while they're lighting candles. So it goes from one generation to another, and I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, we try to hold on to the traditions, and even though we're not religious, I've always felt it was really, really important. Like I think Allison, you talked about this, just those traditions are so important, and I want them, even though we're ethical culturists and we're kind of range from, my daughter is kind of spiritual, we're agnostic, my son's atheist, we feel it's important for them to know their roots and where they came from and hold on to those traditions. So we still do that, and it's being passed on now with my son lighting the menorah, which is such a kick for us, and then the tree in the background.
And we don't want the light to go out.
Right.
I have to sing that song every Hanukkah also.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Happy holidays.
You.
Thank you, Lisa and Ron. Beth or Perry Stein, you're next. Please unmute yourself.
There, it's me. It's Perry. Beth with a beard. So in any case, happy holidays to everyone, however you do it. Our Beth and I at this point have just become total curmudgeons and have pretty much opted out of the whole thing. Lara still does exchanges, and we give her a present and whatnot. But I do remember in my childhood, I grew up with a real amalgamation of friends from all different religions and denominations, and we basically celebrated each other's holidays. And it worked out very, very well because we managed to get out of school a real lot that way. And of course, I was off for the holy grail of finding bacon, and they were going, latkes, wow, and applesauce, this is cool, and various other foods. But what we ended up doing when we got old enough to, get out and about on our own, which is much younger than now. I mean, when we were growing up, kids were much more free-ranging in terms of, what you could do. You were basically limited to the generation of when the streetlights came on, you had to go home, kind of the mentality. So there was a local diner in town called Fiorette's that was sort of equidistant to the various synagogues, churches of whatever denomination, and so on and so forth. And we renamed it St. Fiorette's. And all of the young people, we would get together and we would meet at Fiorette's. And it almost became like our little church, because it wasn't a church, but we would all get together there. And we also used it to ditch school quite a bit. It was like all of a sudden, Ash Tuesday, I would convert, because they couldn't say anything to you if you showed up with, a little something out of the tailpipe. But I have very fond memories of that, and it was a totally non-religious thing. But here we were at a diner, and we renamed the diner a church, and we would all get together there, and it was very nice. But I was grateful to my Christian friends. My best friend growing up came from a very large Italian family, and they were just like, well, what's one more? And so I would get to celebrate Christmas over there, and I do remember it as with fond memories. But it's interesting. You find a way to celebrate, whether you are a religious person or not. It's a holiday season, and you find a way. As we were saying, that it's a solstice. Each religion seems to borrow the holiday from the one that was preeminent before it, and you have all of the solstice celebrations and the harvest celebrations, and they basically are just renaming and making it their own. And that's kind of what we did with the diner, because you can't take away someone's holiday. You might rename it and change it a bit, but you can't turn around and say, well, this solstice doesn't happen anymore. It's been in a way co-opted. But I have fond memories, even if we are curmudgeons over here. So if you haven't gotten cards from us, it's not that we don't love you, it's just that we just kind of opted out. So happy holidays, one and all.
Thank you, Perry. I'm going to go next myself. So Susan mentioned that I was raised Jewish, and that I wasn't happy when she wanted to put up a Christmas tree at first. And I still have very mixed feelings about it. We actually haven't had a tree up for a while. We have actually some really beautiful Christmas tree ornaments, and I love those ornaments. And I would love to display them without a tree, but that really doesn't work. So I still have very mixed feelings about that Christmas tree, but I love our ornaments. Susan also wanted to celebrate Hanukkah by lighting a menorah. And the kids really loved it because it meant playing with fire. And I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. I felt that it was my right to really rebel on that one. I had nothing to do with when that menorah would go up. I definitely did not have happy experiences growing up, did not have happy experiences going to temple, and didn't want anything to do with that. Okay, Afina, you are next. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
I put up a Christmas tree. This year I didn't because the kids weren't coming down from Boston. But growing up, we had a Christmas tree. My father was, like Susan's, a minister. But Christmas was just Christmas. There were no presents because the presents were brought by Santa Claus on December 5th, the birthday of Saint Nicholas of Turkey somewhere. And the purpose was not so much to get a lot of presents, which was nice, but the purpose was to be as clever as you could in packaging, in making up poems, in just being clever and interesting and fun, so that everybody had a good time. But it wasn't the presents themselves. And I am still of two minds about the Christmas tree having a mountain of presents under it, and people just grabbing, and nobody watches what anybody else gets. Well, it's Santa Claus, you had to wait because you had to read the poem, you had to unpack the thing. And so everybody had to watch what everybody else was getting. And I may be just a curmudgeon too, Perry. In my memory, that was so much more fun than the frantic Christmas that we are having most of the time in our family. It was more the fun, like Eric's big box of little presents, than the presents themselves. So I'm still of two minds. I do it, but what can I say?
Thank you, Afina. I want to mention again, by the way, that for the couple of people who are dialed in, you can raise your hand and indicate that you want to speak by pressing *9. That's *9 if you'd like to speak. I know that Cookie is raising her hand in the window. Cookie, I'm not sure what your name is, but if you would like to go ahead, please unmute yourself and you may go ahead. Cookie, okay, we'll come back to you if we.
Okay, I think
there you
I
go.
unmuted.
Okay.
Okay, this is a little different take of what you do this year during a pandemic. And our daughter lives in Seattle and our son is in San Francisco, that area. So one of the things I did is I grew up Jewish and my mother made the best potato pancakes. So my daughter in Seattle, we got the same ingredients. We had, an egg and potatoes and matzo meal and the right kind of oil to fry it in. And I had klezmer music playing in the background, but we made potato pancakes together. And that was one way of being together. The other thing we did was every year we would take the kids. I grew up in the Bronx and I'm a New York City girl, even though we live closer in Bergen County. We would take them to see the Balanchine's Nutcracker at Lincoln Center every year. And so here it is, my daughter in Seattle again. And then we figured out a way to go to see the Nutcracker together. We got it online. What was it? Marquee, I guess. And we lined up to see it at about the same time. So, and you could pause whenever you like. So we saw the traditional Nutcracker that she always loved together. And so it felt like we spent the time with each other. We used to go and see I missed that this year. I'm an artist, to see all the windows and all the creativity in the city. And after we were really, really cold, we'd continue down to Chinatown where we'd get a delicious hot meal. One other interesting story, last year on Christmas, we like klezmer music, and there's a particular group we like. She lived in Princeton for a while, and they would have the big tree in Palmer Square, and they would have a big menorah, and it would be lit. And then we would follow this klezmer group playing down the street to a hotel where there were pancakes waiting and big round tables and donuts, and we'd all dance and sing. So that's why we knew about the klezmer group. But through them, we found out that they would be performing on on Christmas. And it would be at a temple in New Jersey, and it would be a buffet. Anyone care to guess what the buffet was? Temple Christmas? Chinese food. Really? So that was a great deal of fun, and that was a year ago. So I've missed, being able to go into the city. We're being very careful to be safe. But I love celebrating all holidays. One of my favorites is Chinese New Year, which we would also go into Chinatown for that. So you give me a holiday that is kind to people and shares, and I'll celebrate.
Thank you, Cookie. That's a beautiful story. I want to mention also, if you're having trouble finding the raise hand button, Susan reminds me that the folks at Zoom did an upgrade and they moved it. So if you have upgraded Zoom, and you may not even know that you did, but if you did, you may have the raise hand feature in the reactions button, which is a different location than they had it before. Linda Bennett, you're next. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Enjoying these stories enormously. So I'll give a little history. When I grew up in a family that was of Jewish background or whatever. So we didn't celebrate anything Christmas, and we barely celebrated Hanukkah, with the result that my sister and I found ourselves kind of isolated and felt kind of deprived. So fast forward, when my husband and I got married, he also was born, of Jewish parents and so on, but they were much more radical than we were. So for example, he never had a bar mitzvah. I think they went out for bacon and eggs for his bar mitzvah breakfast. But so when kids came along, we decided we wanted a Christmas tree, but we wanted to, it needed not to be a religious symbol of Christianity. So we took lathing, which if you know what that is, that's about 2 inches by half an inch boards. And we created a huge Star of David and wrapped it with aluminum foil and propped it up at the top of the tree. And the ornaments were, non-religious ornaments. Some of them, like the kids baked in the oven with that kind of clay that kids can work with, and you put it in a toaster oven and it hardens and colors, looks like stained glass and all of this other stuff. So we still have those somewhere, I guess. And now Samantha and Mark have everything. So they put up a Christmas tree. Now Mark's background is Christian, but they all come together with ethical culture and, learning about wider beliefs and so on. But my kids go crazy with the gifts, except that they have to wait. They go to run and they pick up a gift and they hand it to the person who is the recipient, and they have to wait till that person opens it. They can't just, when they were younger, forget it. Everything was opened in 5 minutes and nobody knew what anything was doing. So, but now at 9 and 12, we can, organize them a bit to be more thoughtful, and especially when they're choosing gifts themselves, they want to see how the recipient accepts it. But this year, of course, for the first time, and maybe the only time, we decided to burn 2020. So they made cardboard, 2 of them, cardboard 2020s. One of them had each of us write something that we wanted to burn from 2020. And then they made a fire in their fire pit. So we were all outside, which was our family, Mark's sister, and then a neighbor who, made sure that he kept distance from us. And it was cold as the devil outside. But we would have gotten closer to the fire, but there was smoke would go in this direction and that direction. So you couldn't really get close enough to warm up. But we had fun. And I do have a picture, if I can open it, that I will share with you. Let me do this here. Okay. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. I'm gonna go here. Where is it?
Linda, if you want, oh, there you go. Okay.
Oh, I want to open this.
It looks really great. That was terrific, Linda.
Could you see it?
Yeah. When you had it open before, it was good. You could see the 2020 in the cardboard, the box at the bottom as it was.
Okay, so you see all the little stars?
Yeah.
Those are household matches, little, like from a matchbook. So as those caught, there'd be little flares of fire as each of those caught. So this was the smaller one. The other one already had gotten burned up, but yeah. So, okay. So I wanted to end with that. As I say, I hope we don't ever have to do that again, you know, so. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Linda. Ruth Olson, you're next. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay, Happy New Year, everybody. I have 2 stories, one from the distant past and one from the present. When we were growing up, my mother was Jewish and my father was Lutheran, and they were both what I consider Orthodox atheists. So we just had culture as our celebrations. And I have wonderful memories every Christmas Eve. Mom and my sister Judith and I would go out onto the streets of New York City and find a Christmas tree and drag it home. And we would string popcorn and cranberries and watch. I don't know if anybody remembers, Channel 9 had a Yule log burning all night, and you could tune into Channel 9 and they had Christmas carols. So we would decorate the tree, and it was just something we always did and always loved. And I didn't know until I was an adult that the reason that we did this was because we didn't have very much money, and Christmas Eve, all the trees were half price. So, you know, my mother finally, I asked her why that tradition began. And she said, because I didn't have enough money for a tree. So I thought that was wonderful because we grew up thinking that this was just the way it was. We were not religious at all. This was just something we did. And she turned something that could have been, you know, kind of sad into a very special tradition. So I thank her for that. And then the story in the present, Janet Glass's grandchildren, Max and Roxy, who I think some of you know, celebrate both Christmas and Hanukkah. And we decided we would help them celebrate Hanukkah. And so we started giving them small presents, you know, for the 8 nights. And then my sister Judith had a wonderful idea. She said, why don't we just tie them up in string and put them in a shopping bag, like a Whole Foods shopping bag, and tie long string and have the kids fish every night for a different present. That would save wrapping paper, and it would be a fishing expedition for the kids. And then there was one, the last night was always a slightly larger present, and that would be tied with a different kind of string. So we took them over, I guess when Max was 3 or 4, when he was first able to do it. And that's been a tradition that's gone on ever since. And apparently what Jesse said is the kids are so excited every year to get the fishing bag with all the presents on it. So those are 2 very nice traditions that I hope will continue.
Thank you, Ruth. Peter Casteris, you're next. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Good morning, all. Happy New Year. All right. Yeah, boy, I think about this season. It's always been thankful. I've been very, very lucky and blessed to be, I was brought up in a family that believed in giving, and the meaning of the season has always been about giving. So I can remember, my God, it's just been year after year of whether it be helping in soup kitchens or helping the homeless, which carried on throughout the year. But my mother especially was very, very involved in giving. So the meaning of Christmas for us was always about that, and receiving presents was always nice too. But it was always about giving, and I carried that into my school days as a teacher, where we did a lot of projects, a lot of give back, and I love that. But it's interesting because as I think of Christmas and I think of the things that have really touched my heart the most, they've been about music and messages. So I can remember the most awesome Christmas gift I ever received, I thought, was when I received the Barry Manilow album. It was like, oh my God, I got so into this album. Then it was like Elvis's Golden Hits. So it was like, that was like I was like 11 or 12. And I got so into these albums. It was like great. I had a little phonograph. I was like so pumped up. That advanced. I remember in high school, again, music would come around. And every year we would have the Oh Holy Night chorus. It was amazing. Like this kid, and they would always pick one great singer every year in high school to sing the Oh Holy Night chorus. Very stirring. Like it was just really intense. And that carried on through the years. I remember starting in my 30s. I remember we used to go every year to the Paul Winter consort over at St. John's the Divine to do the solstice there. And any of you ever done that? It's incredible. Puts on an amazing show every year. Of course, that's not happening now, but I love that. And then like big messages. I loved watching The Grinch every year. And I loved when he was hanging off the cliff and then his heart would grow to the size of 10 Grinches when he realized the true meaning of the holidays. And he lifted that sled up and saved the day for Whoville. And that Christmas story with Ralphie getting his tongue stuck on the pole. And I just love like those kinds of traditions. And one of the coolest things that I loved also was, I know it may seem a little cliche, but I used to love watching the Waltons as a young boy, because the messages were always so good. And it was about people standing up for people. And I can remember all of us, we would have, just like Lisa was saying, with her family, lots of music. We had a lot of guitar players, and then we would all gather. We'd tell stories and sing songs, and then we would all watch The Homecoming together, which was the beautiful Walton story that they would show every Christmas. And I love that because it was, it actually still to this day brings tears to my eyes, because it was all about giving, about standing up for people, and about, really, really caring about folks. And, those kinds of values really kind of, they're so important, yet they seem kind of lost in this, with the current administration. And it's so great to really remember that. I'm doing a video project right now for my family, and it's bringing up a lot of really cool memories of all the times we've had. And I miss that right now. I love seeing you all on Zoom, but Zoom's getting old. I want to get back to to real face-to-face contact. But thanks for doing this. I really appreciate Susan, you coming up with this. I don't know if it was your idea, but it's a great way to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And Susan, I just watched The Homecoming, actually. It was the first time I'd seen it. I'm not sure if Susan, I don't know if Susan had seen it before, but I had never seen it before.
Yes, I knew it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful story. Okay, Diane Kozarski, you're next. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
I like, as Linda said, I'm enjoying these stories very much. I am a veteran of two different ways of celebrating one holiday. Richard is Catholic, but a sort of European Catholic, not too doctrinaire. Go for the big holidays and just glide along in between. But Poles, like Italians, celebrate on New Year's Eve. So I shifted from a kind of Presbyterian, Midwestern, everything on Christmas morning experience. Although when I was a kid growing up in a quite a socially conscious Presbyterian church in Rochester, New York,
it was almost like an Episcopal church. It was very high church, and they celebrated Advent. Had one amazing music, real candles in the sanctuary on Christmas Eve. You know, it was a really big production. The George Eastman's School of Music was like the director of our music program taught at that school. So it was pretty high class music scene. So leaving Rochester and living in New York City and then getting married to Richard, I fell in with their way of celebrating Christmas, which is Christmas Eve. It's supposed to be a meatless meal, but it's always very lavish with lots of fish and a special kind of soup that you eat, which is, as Eric has experienced, the kids find it strange, a Polish mushroom soup, but it's delicious. You know, they've come to appreciate it. But and it was instead of the crazy the torture of waiting for being able to open your presents Christmas morning, and then this mad mayhem of tearing everything open in 5 minutes, which I find appalling now, but probably as a kid, it was a lot of fun. The Kozarski family style was much more formal. You had an elegant dinner with candles and fancy plates and this special meal, and the presents would be piled up. The youngest child would deliver them round to each participant in the evening. But before anything started, like late in the afternoon, as the sky was darkening, it was time to share opłatek. That's a very thin layer of wheat, usually used to make communion wafers, but these are not consecrated, and they're often stamped up with pretty scenes of the nativity or angels, you know, some various Christian iconography, but they're fine for people to just handle and trade around. And so everyone would get a little piece of this very thin white wafer who was in the family party, and you would go around to each person in the room and offer them a piece of your wafer, your opłatek, and you would give you some of theirs, and you'd take a little bite, and then you'd exchange good wishes. And they could be just kind of formalities: health, wealth, and happiness. So grateful to be in your company today. You know, the kids kind of clung to that formula, but the grown-ups could go into a great long personal exchange about the year that had passed and hopes for the coming year. And that was such a nice, calm, and intimate way to knit yourself into the re-seeing people that you didn't see on a daily basis. That I really recommend it as some form of that to any, you know, like holiday party. So I just wanted to share that kind of cool idea that Polish Christmas Vigilia has come up with. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Diane. Mary Ann Claxton, you're next. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, everybody. It's been a total pleasure. Christmas started very early. A couple of weeks before Christmas, my mother would go shopping and buy coats and jackets for people in my father's practice who didn't have much money, maybe didn't have good enough clothing. My mother would bring home the stuff, and I was the wrapper, even though I was just a little kid, but I did a good job. And the piano was piled high with presents that were given out during the week. My mother would contact these families and get the gifts given out. But Christmas Eve was different. During the afternoon, she and I would go to the fish store and buy eels. And they were chopped up and ready to be cooked, floured and special. And then she cooked them about 5 o'clock, and I got the job. I was my mother's little helper. We had 4 kids, but I was the one. And I walked with them as far out as I could in a little bag to my grandmother's, who was about 6 blocks away. And she, of course, enjoyed that very much. I got home, we'd have our fish dinner, which was just spaghetti alla olla and some other nice goodies, and usually fried shrimp. We didn't have a big thing, lavish fish meal. But later on, the adults went to church. They were Catholic, sort of, but they went to church. Kids stayed home. We enjoyed looking at the tree. And then when the adults got home, the men, my father and my uncles, would take out their mandolins and guitars and start playing all kinds of wonderful Italian music and regular carols. And the 4 of us, the 4 children, we were all singers in my home, and we would harmonize, and we would go through the house singing Silent Night and other carols, and then go up the stairs to my aunt's home. And as we sang going up the stairs, my father said we sounded like little angels in heaven, the way we, with our little high voices. And it really was very impressive, even to us. In the morning, we opened our gifts, but the morning tradition in an Italian place, from what I gather, even Lisa may have had this, the godchildren of my father, he was a godfather to many people. They always chose the local doctor to be the godfather because they could afford to take care of them if the parents died. He had many godchildren, and they would come over and visit and get a gift from my mother. And then I and my brothers and sisters would go over to our godparents and bring gifts to them and then collect our gifts. And we were always given a little cordial glass of Southern Comfort. I don't know what was on my godmother's mind, but that's what she gave us. And then we just come home and have a wonderful dinner and open gifts. And that was more or less that Christmas, that type of Christmas. And very, very much fun, very musical, just Peter, right, a Christmas after your own heart. And our Christmases throughout the years were very different. Just Christmas trees and gifts with my kids, because we lived here and my rest of my family was in Long Island. But now my daughter is Jewish, and so their family has like 20 or 30 people at a Hanukkah party, which includes me, of course, and everybody giving gifts to each other at the same time. Sounds like a menagerie, like you had Kozlowski. I think you were the one who mentioned that. But the Christmas day is just a plain quiet day. We don't do much about it anymore. This Christmas was 32 degrees, and my family, my daughter, her husband, and the 2 granddaughters who were in their 20s came over, and we sat out in a little sunny area in my backyard, the only little area, and we sat there. Each had 1 piece of Italian pastry, and I put eggnog out, and we sat there supposedly for a half an hour visit. After an hour, I said, I have to go in. I'm very cold. They said, we're not going in. We don't want to jeopardize you. So we sat out another hour in 32 degrees. And by that time, they got up and left. And I went in the house, and it took me an hour just to warm up. But that was our new Christmas. It was just not, well, that's how it was this year. So that was our Christmas now and our Christmas then. It was a totally different world.
Thank you, Marianne. Glad you were able to finally warm up. I know exactly what you Eileen White, you're next. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay, I grew up in Miami, and to secular Jewish family. Did a little Hanukkah, little potato latkes. We had Christmas that we would decide what day Christmas was, and what it was a present exchange. We said, okay, today will be Christmas, and left presents out that night so that everybody in the 4 of us, the nuclear family, would find them the next day. I got married. Jim is not Jewish and from Virginia. And we didn't have a Christmas tree for quite a few years. And then we decided, my older son was born on December 14th. So we decided we would have a Christmas tree, and we would invite all his Jewish friends, because we were in Teaneck, to help decorate the tree. And they all got a real kick out of coming over to our house to decorate a Christmas tree, which they didn't have Christmas trees at home. But every year from the time that I met Jim, we went to Virginia for Christmas. The part of Virginia where Walton's Mountain is. In fact, Jim's grandfather was the principal of a school in that town during the Depression. But that's the same area. We went every year, including the year that Jacob, my oldest son, was born. And he was 10 days old. And that time we took a plane down there because I didn't feel like driving that long time right after having a baby. But every year we have gone to Virginia, including years where we were both working and had to be back on the 26th. So we'd go for 24 hours, drive down, or early years, take a Greyhound bus down and come back to be back in 24 hours to go back to work. Well, our kids are used to going every year. We drive down to Virginia where Jim's extended family is. And now a lot of them are gone, but we still have Christmas down there every year. And in fact, my kids thought that Santa Claus only came down that chimney at my mother-in-law, father-in-law's house. And this year, we couldn't be there. And the grandchildren also are used to going down there every year. So what my daughter-in-law did was she had my sister-in-law send the stockings and the tablecloth and made her house look like it looks like in Virginia. So her kids would have some feeling of tradition of the way it is normally. But what we did this year is we had a Zoom that included people in family from California and from Virginia, which we'd also done on Thanksgiving, we did on Christmas. And my Teaneck family and I did a little outdoor. I didn't think it was all that cold that day. I thought it was the only day that it was all right. And we did Thanksgiving outside and we did Christmas outside. Not for very long, but just long enough to exchange the presents. So it sort of brought tradition.
Thank you. Thank you, Eileen. Terry Karp, you're next. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay. Growing up, now this is when I was little, we had a Christmas tradition of watching Babes in Toyland, a 1930s Laurel and Hardy film. Now I'm going to do a spoiler alert. The plot is Mother Peeps can't make the mortgage and is going to be thrown out unless little Bo Peep marries the evil landlord. Ollie and Stan saved the day with an army of wooden soldiers to battle the boogeyman. It was all great. Well, one Christmas day when I became a mom, I fetched my daughters. I was all excited. They were about 8 and 4 years old. And I said, oh, Babes in Toyland is on. And I let them know this was going to be the greatest thing ever. And I was watching them because I was relishing the moment when I pass on this tradition. And it took 5 or 10 minutes of watching this corny old movie. And I see them glancing at each other, looking down, their little fingers twisting in their laps. And finally, the older one said, Mom, we have something we need to do. And so that's and Peter Castaris's, for some reason, his discussion about his movie traditions reminded me of that one. So sometimes they don't always play. I hope somebody else comes after me because this shouldn't be the one to end our nice discussion here. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Terry. I'll add that I had a similar experience. It had nothing to do with Christmas, but as a boy, I loved a TV show called Thunderbirds, which was in super marionation. They had these marionettes as a science fiction show. And I remember when it finally came to streaming or DVD, I was able to get hold of it. And I told Ben and Rachel that we were going to watch this thing that I loved, and it's the greatest thing in the world. And boy, oh boy, 5 minutes was the most they would last. They thought I was a fool. We have no more hands up, and that's perfect timing because it's about 12:30. So I'll hand it back to Susan.
Thank you. I'll just end with one recording thing that my kids still do. We recorded the Charlie Brown Christmas and the Snowman movie and They wrote Rudolph and the Santa Claus movie, like in the 80s, right? Or not, when VCRs came out. And it has commercials from that time, and we made the VCR recording into a DVD, and the kids watch that. That is part of the holiday tradition, and they want to see the 7-Up commercial of the tacky thing coming down, and they can't wait to see those old commercials, and watch those movies. So that is, they did like that. So so thank you. I'm going to end by saying thank you so much to everyone for sharing all your treasured memories, and all the lovely thoughts that created in my mind's eye from them. You completely brought all of those memories alive, and thank you very much for sharing them this morning. I'd also like to share to thank our Zoom master, David Bland.